Hi, this is Shane Starr with Reflections on Religion on a beautiful February day in Irvine, California. So, our question this week is, if you were on trial for your faith, how much evidence would the prosecutors have against you? And to put this question in the proper context, we would look at first where we started in this series with the question about the universe being random or purposeful. It was our conclusion that it's more likely a purposeful universe. That leads us to ways to intuit God, through feeling, through truth, through beauty, through contemplating the mysteries of the universe. From there, we examined the different routes that people think how one can get to heaven. We looked at having belief, and that didn't work. So we looked at having the correct beliefs. That didn't work. We looked at works, and we fall far short when it comes to that. And we determined that it's more of a relationship than it is a mathematical equation, at least in terms of transformative faith in God. And then we looked at some ways to carry out our spiritual lives with the same kind of discipline we use to master academic material or physical fitness or something of the nature of career improvement. So that brings us to today, and today is the test. And again, that test is take everything you have and everything you do, and if you were arrested for being a member of your faith, how much evidence would the prosecutors have on you? Would they be able to prove, yes, this person's guilty as charged? Or would they say, yeah, there's really nothing there? Let's take a look at what that would look like as we go to trial, virtually anyway. So I think there's three ways you can come out on this. Either you're guilty as charged, and in my case, and most people watching this, it would be, we claim to be Christians. So we'd either be guilty as charged, like the early Christians who were persecuted were, or they would be non-guilty. It's like, no, they don't do any of these things. We have no evidence that they're Christian. And I think most people who claim to believe in God would kind of fall in that little guilty, maybe not guilty, kind of lukewarm, a coin toss, basically. So let's look at what that looks like, or what it would look like in real life. So I think, for me at least, I think the first indication that someone would be guilty of being a Christian or a temple attending Jewish person or mosque attending Muslim or any of the great religions, I think church attendance, mass attendance, mosque, temple, I think attendance to that place is the most definitive thing, and that would be the most damning evidence. Think about this. How many of us claim to be Christians, myself being one of them, who nonetheless never went to church? That doesn't mean you're not a real Christian unless you go. I'm not trying to guilt trip you that way. But there are enough people who claim to be Christian who don't go to church, let alone the non-Christians who don't go, obviously. I think that if you actually do go to church in this day and age, you take time out of your Sunday, especially if you go every Sunday, I think you'd pretty much be guilty without even looking at any of the other evidence. Like if they had records like this person attends every single Sunday, and you could say, well, yeah, but unless you're a kid whose parents are dragging you or something, there's no way out of that. I think it's you're cooked, as they say nowadays. You like that's it. I would say the next thing, having religious artifacts, especially if you wear them, cross, a rosary, having a Bible, like a Bible somewhere close to you, not stuffed away in the books or on a bookshelf collecting dust or something, but it's at your bedside, or it's in a drawer at your work, or in your bag or something. I think this by itself doesn't make someone a Christian, but it would pretty much, it would, circumstantial evidence there would be strong. This plus church, it's a no-brainer. Next, if there's a way to document prayer, I think if someone prays a lot, I think ultimately that's stronger than church even. However, it's hard to prove that whether someone was praying or whether they were just meditating. And I think sometimes even the best of us can get those things mixed up. Like how many times I'll pray right before I fall asleep, and at the end I don't know what it is. It's part prayer, part dream, part movie in my head. I don't know. All I know is it gives me a really nice sleep though. Okay, next would be witnessing. How could you deny to be Christian if you were convincing other people to be Christian? Now this one's not as conclusive as it might seem at first, because think of the Sopranos TV show. Tony Soprano, the crime lord of New Jersey, he preached religion to his kids all the time, and meanwhile he was a serial cheater, murderer, thief, all the bad things, but he made his kids do church and made them do the Catholic rituals. And so just witnessing, as in following the traditions, that in and of itself I don't think makes someone a Christian, at least not persecutable in my view. So next, self-sacrifice for others. This is a good one because there's nothing more Christian than that, right? But then you couldn't put this by itself, because there's a lot of non-Christians who do good works and are self-sacrificing and help others and do nice things for their community. So this is a Christian-like thing to do, but it doesn't automatically put you down as a Christian. And last but not least, I'd say studying and knowledge of the Bible. There could be a lot of different reasons. You might be in college studying it. You might just be interested in learning more about it, but not really believing. But chances are, if you've done it for a really long time, you keep going back. Picture someone who keeps going to bars but saying they're not a drinker. If they're drinking at the bar, if you keep reading about Christianity and you have books about it and you have a Bible and you're studying it and the stories of Moses and David and Jesus and the Apostle Paul and the things that happened in the book of Acts, it's hard to say that there isn't something there, But I think taking all these things together, I think regular church attendance, and for better or worse, I think regular church attendance is the definitive thing. When someone does that all the time, takes time out of their day, goes religiously, no pun intended, I think the prosecutors would have them. All right, moving on to the not guilty people, that would simply be not doing any of these things on the list. They don't go to church. They have no Christian or faith related, if we're talking about another faith, artifacts. They don't pray. They don't witness. They don't study. They have no knowledge of the Bible, and they don't partake in acts of self-sacrifice. So I think people who would get out of it, that's pretty much a no-brainer, and we don't even really need to talk about that one. But here's the main part of this video, if you got this far, it's the people where it's a toss-up, a coin flip. There are a lot of ways in life we can be inconclusive, and I think, let's say that you do believe in a God or a higher power of some sort, and for all intents and purposes you accept the Christian version of what it means to be religious. And when people ask, you say, oh yeah, I believe in God. Maybe you even go to church once in a while, like on Easter or Christmas or something. But for the most part, you don't go. As far as artifacts go, maybe you have a cross, but you don't wear it. Maybe it's put away, with your childhood items or something. Maybe you have a Bible, but you don't read it. As far as prayer goes, maybe, whenever you did something bad and you're going to get in trouble, it's like, God, please never again. I'll quit. Just get me out of this one last time. If you're one of those, which most of us have been at one time or another, it's like, do you pray? Well, kind of, if you're interested in competing worldviews, like say you believe in God, but like when I was in college, I always believed in God, but I spent a large part of my time studying Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Sartre. All these guys were hardcore atheists. And so, what does that say? It's like I entertain that stuff, maybe I think it doesn't go like black or white, hot or cold. It starts with doubting little pieces of the creed. It's like, well, I believe in God, I'm Christian, but I don't know about the virgin birth, or I believe in all that, but did Jesus really have to come back from the dead to be a Christian? I mean, it's mostly about what he taught, right? I think those are the types of things where you still call yourself a Christian, but it's starting to disintegrate on the edges, and before you know it, there's an old saying usually attributed to John Lennon, but I think it happened earlier than that, and that's, life is what happens while you're busy doing something else. I think as far as faith goes, we can apply that saying to faith. Your relationship with God is what happens how you live. Like, you can say on the spot this or that, but the long story of how you live is going to be more definitive, I think. So I think this lukewarm, theoretical, but very real person in our society, maybe they go to church once in a while, maybe they pray when they need something. They don't really talk about God unless they're at a funeral or something. They don't really study much, but maybe they have a Bible. They do nice things once in a while. Those are the people who this whole line of questioning is for, because there's either a God or there's not a God. But if there is a God, and that God loves you, and your decision about following God or not, it's a toss-up. Do you really want to be in that spot in your life? Most people in this case would get out of the theoretical being on trial for your faith. There wouldn't be enough evidence to convict them, and they would be not guilty in society's eyes, but maybe guilty in the final judgment, and I don't think any of us want to be in that place. So if you're outside of that full communion of God, which can be in your own way, not my way, not his way, not her way, but your way, what can get you close with God. Maybe it's time, like right now, right this second, to rethink your priorities. Take a stand either way, be innocent for the world or be guilty for God, because either way, it's either nothing, as in God doesn't even exist, or it's everything, because if God exists, it is everything. But the one thing I can guarantee you and myself and the whole world is that God's existence is definitely not a maybe. So make up your mind and act accordingly. That's all I have for this week. God bless. Have a good one.